Excellency, honorable guest speaker around the globe, ladies and gentlemen. Now, we would like to invite our guest speaker, Erin, a singer from USA, and the topic is mentoring and novice teachers' perceptions at a local high school in Texas. So, our guest speaker will have 1 hour and 15 minutes for the presentation, including question and answer. Now, I would like to give the floor to our guest speaker. Please welcome.
Good morning, everyone from Texas. It's evening here, and my colleague and I, Dr. Matthew Etchells, are going to present on novice teachers and mentoring. So I'm going to share my screen right now, and we will get started. Did that work?
Yep, it's worked well. Thank you.
All right. So I'm Dr. Erin Singer. I'm a lead coordinator, and I work for Texas A&M University in College Station, Texas. Matthew and I both work for the Education Leadership Research Center there. I'm a lead coordinator for Project Massive Open Online Individualized Learning, which is also called Project MOOPIL. And I'm the Director of Curriculum and Instruction for the We Teach Texas P12 Mentoring and Coaching Academy. Dr. Etchells, would you like to introduce yourself? There you go.
Howdy. I was muted for a moment by the organizer, but we're good. So my name is Matthew Etchells. I'm not originally from Texas, from the UK, and then I went to Texas to do my PhD in 2013. So I'm the Director of Education Outreach, Marketing and Communications for the ELRC, our Leadership Center, and CRDLLA, which is our Dual Language Center. I'm also the Director of Marketing and Recruitment for We Teach Texas, P12 Mentoring and Coaching Academy. And then I'm also the lead coordinator on a multi-million-dollar government of education grant for A+. So we look at serving underserved schools. So they're my roles within the Texas A&M University.
All right. So we're going to talk about today, Dr. Etchells and my experience with being mentored and mentoring other people. We're going to talk about beginning teachers, why beginning teachers matter. And we're going to talk about attrition and retention for novice teachers and what mentors need to know about mentoring the novice teachers. So I've been a teacher. I'll just give you a little bit of my background. I've been a teacher for 23 years. I started teaching in 1997, so a very long time ago. And my mentor that was assigned to me when I began teaching told me that she didn't have time for me and that she was not going to be my mentor. This made life sort of difficult for me, as I was a brand new teacher, and I didn't really know what I was doing. And so I had to ask other people to help me. And I finally had to find my own mentor when the teacher across the hall asked me finally if I needed help. So every new teacher that I meet, I'm always concerned that they have a proper mentor, someone that's going to be there to help them and help them with their teaching career. Dr. Etchells, go ahead.
Yeah, you're welcome. Please go ahead, please. Thank you.
There we go. So for me, I started teaching in the UK, in England, and then moved to Wales and taught there whilst I was qualifying to be an educator, and then went out to the Middle East, to Dubai. I lived in Sharjah for 8 years. Some folks may be aware of Sharjah in the UAE, and then came to the US. So I've had multiple mentors in different countries, and I've been a mentor to multiple educators in different countries. And similar to how Dr. Singer described it, that's been my mentor-mentee relationship, with a couple of subtle differences. One, the structure in the UK when I first became a teacher was a little bit more formalized with mentoring. So I had some very good mentors as I started my profession when I was training to be a teacher. I had a very good mentor in Wales. And then my first couple of years of teaching, I had very good mentors and very structured hierarchy within the school that I worked at in London, and had very good mentors there. However, when I went out to the Middle East, I then moved from being the mentee to being the mentor. And I will say that in my first year of teaching, I became head of drama at a school in London. So I was immediately, my first day on the job, in charge of 8 teachers. One of them who was new as well, he just qualified at the same time. So we were trying to figure things out together, including where's the stapler, how do we use the photocopier, all the things that initial teachers are trying to decide upon. Worried about classroom management, worried about pedagogy, how do I do all these different things? But when I went out to the Middle East, I immediately started training teachers on an annual basis and doing recruitment for the school that I worked at, which is a large international, multinational school K-12 system. And we would recruit about 55 new teachers every year, and then would bring them to the school and would train them. And they came from all over, Australia, South Africa, the UK, many from Ireland. If you know the United Arab Emirates, there's a heavy recruitment of Irish educators to the UAE. And they would all come in. Many of them had not taught before. So it was their first time ever being in front of children in a classroom. Many of them, it was their first time out of Ireland, the first time leaving their home country. So that meant that we really had to think about mentoring, but we were also needing mentoring ourselves. So it created a lot of dynamics and some of those themes, some of those issues that came up, you'll hear in our presentation today as Dr. Singer walks you through the next couple of slides. Thank you, Dr. Singer.
So the state of Texas requires that every brand new teacher who has less than 2 years of teaching be assigned a mentor from the district or from the school. Most often, like I was saying before, this comes in the form of someone being told that they're going to be a new teacher's mentor, and that's often not where a teacher has been asked if they want to. They're just being told that they have to. All too often, novice teachers they end up being alone because their mentor wasn't properly trained or isn't willing to be a mentor. So like in my case, my mentor said, nope, she did not want to be my mentor. She didn't have the preparation for it. And she actually resented the administrator who told her that she had to be my mentor my first year of teaching.
And just on that point as well, Dr. Singer, so one of the things that we've noticed in Texas is that in the education code, it says that everybody in their first 2 years, every new teacher in their first 2 years that we refer to as neophyte here, must have a mentor. However, when we look at the education system in Texas and across the US, we see that teachers have to be credentialed, assistant principals have to be credentialed, principals have to be credentialed, and superintendents have to be credentialed. And they all have to maintain a certain number of professional development hours every 5 years. So for example, for teachers, it's 150 hours that they must take of professional development time over a 5-year period. However, when we start turning our attention towards mentors, we see that the mentor can have experience, but no credential. And under the current code, that's okay, but it's not okay with us. So we've developed a whole mentoring and coaching program at A&M to credential mentors who are supervising teachers in their first 2 years that we call the We Teach Texas P12 Mentoring and Coaching Academy, that we will talk about more tomorrow, same time tomorrow. And what we think will happen is that this credential will go across Texas and potentially across the US, and will lead to an environment where new teachers feel that there is almost a nest or an incubator for them going into a school that has a leadership and mentoring framework set up for them. And our overall belief is we think that this will have a footprint and impact on teacher retention, teacher happiness, engagement in the field. We think there'll be lots of benefits to this. But the Texas Education Code says that everybody should have a mentor for the first 2 years, and it's created a whole flurry of research around what's happening for educators in the first 2 years and how will the Texas Education Code affect those pieces. And I know, to speak internationally, having worked internationally, I can kind of speak around the world a little bit. Thinking about these kind of codes in the education system, often a government will think about a code like this. Everybody should be mentored. And one of the things that I like in Texas is up to the universities and the regions, the centers, to think about how that will play out within school districts and within different universities. So for example, at Texas A&M University, how do we react? How do we integrate the Texas Education Code into our work? What classes do we provide for teachers coming up through the system? What professional development do we provide for teachers already in the field so that they can meet this expectation and meet this need? And one thing to bear in mind, every time we don't do our job fully, we could potentially lose a teacher in the field. And that means we have to work harder at the university to get more teachers into the field. And just to talk about COVID for a second, we know that COVID-19 is going to have a big effect on teacher attrition and teachers moving into the field of education. We know it's going to have a two-way effect on teachers leaving and teachers not entering. So that's one thing that we'll be thinking about. So for example, that exacerbates the need and amplifies the need for effective mentors within schools. That if there aren't effective mentors, the teachers coming in the schools are more likely to leave. And we know this from the research that Dr. Singer will go over with you now.
Thank you, Dr. Etchells, as usual. So the purpose of this particular study was to examine the influence of mentors on already veteran teachers and how their first year of teaching went. So I taught for a high school a year, actually it's been 2 years now. I taught 11th and 12th grade English at a high school. And over the last 23 years of teaching, I've talked to many teachers, hundreds of teachers, and we all seem to have the same story. And that story is my mentor didn't want to have anything to do with me. My mentor said they didn't have time for me. And so I was left to find my own mentor and try and find my way my very first year of teaching. And so we compare, a lot of teachers compare this to being on fire or actually drowning. And so most of the time that's how I identified my first year of teaching. Well, it was on fire, or I was drowning under all the paperwork and I was drowning under all the responsibilities, and I didn't know what to do and I didn't know who to turn to get help for this. So I taught with these teachers, these 7 teachers, and we talked about this kind of on a regular basis about, what was your first year of teaching like, and how did you survive? And when we talk about our first year, not us thriving or exceeding or doing well, but actually surviving. So this is what this particular study talks about. The research questions were, does having a mentor teacher during one's first year of teaching alleviate or ease some of the struggle new teachers experience? And did having a mentor during the first year of teaching help novice teachers stay in the teaching field? So we all know very well that novice teachers leave within the first 5 years of teaching, and that's our job, is to try and keep our new teachers in schools rather than quitting and having to retrain teachers over and over and over again. So we used, in this particular study, I used narrative inquiry, it's the best way to understand the situated experiences of novice teachers and their mentors through detailed stories of their lived experiences. So throughout this year that I taught in this high school, we met on the 7 teachers and I met on a regular basis, and they told me their stories and the details around how they became teachers and how their mentors did or didn't have an effect on them, and how they actually would be mentors or not be mentors. So many of the teachers in this particular case, while they did have great mentors, said that they couldn't mentor novice teachers and they wouldn't be able to mentor those novice teachers. They weren't willing to. So teacher attrition, we were just talking about this. Novice teacher attrition has been a crisis for decades. Linda Darling-Hammond does quite a bit of research. Ingersoll, Marilyn Stuckey, Isadenia, they all do research on this, and it's prevalent. And it's everywhere. We know that new teachers are leaving. They spend the first 2 or 3 years in teaching, and something happens and they decide to quit. One of the 7 teachers that I was working with when I taught at the high school, he not only quit before he quit before the end of his first year. He even quit before the end of the first semester. That's how upset he was with teaching and the lack of support he was receiving from the administration. So it's not just about teaching the 1 year. I mean, some of these teachers are leaving before the end of the first year, which can create even more problems for teachers. And I'll go into that in a minute. So the promising solution for this is the mentor teacher, and a caring mentor teacher, not just someone who's been assigned to be this mentor, someone who wants to be a mentor, someone who has the skills and the knowledge to be a mentor, not someone who's been teaching children for 20 years. We've discovered that just because you can teach children does not necessarily mean you can teach adults. So we've also found that a supportive mentor teacher providing feedback to a novice teacher during his or her first year can mean the difference between that novice teacher having a career in education or finding another job at the end of the year. I've known many teachers who have said at the Christmas break or at spring break that they've decided they're going to go back to retail, which means working in a shop somewhere rather than being a teacher.
Can I ask, whilst we're on teacher attrition and retention, maybe Mr. Netra can answer this as the host. Does anybody know what your teacher attrition is in Cambodia, say over a 5-year period? What does it look like? How many teachers leave?
Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, in Cambodia, relevant to teacher attrition and retention, in this case, it's happened in these cases, this based on the situation around the country, the whole country. So it seems to be hard sometimes to identify, the specific areas in terms of the teacher attrition and retention. So I just want to reveal my personal assumption. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, in the US, there's some research saying that we're looking about 60% attrition over a 5-year period. So really, if you can look at teachers in their first couple of years and retain them in their first couple of years, then you can have a significant impact on their career trajectory and the likelihood that they would be retained. But as it is in many countries, and thank you, the comment from Quebec, 30% is what we're getting from Quebec in Canada. If we look at teacher retention across the globe, then we know that certain programs, getting unified teachers into a leadership program, paying off their student debt is one of the features that we have in the US, where schools will pay off their tuition fees if teachers stay in a school for, say, 3 years. There's lots of interventions about school climate, but we know that teacher retention and teacher attrition is a global topic. It depends on different countries. There are some countries, Singapore, teacher attrition is very, very low. So we know that it changes globally. But in the US, we have had a continued process of a high need for recruitment. We've had high attrition, and we've had structural issues with retention. And we're seeing that teachers after the 5-year period are still leaving the field. So it seems to be, the question has been raised now in the US to some level, is teaching something that you do in 2020 in America for a career? Is this something that you start at age 21, 20, and you do until, 65, 60? Is it something that is a career, or is teaching something that you do from 20 to 25 and then you go and do something else? We're kind of pondering these things, and how best to spend the money in the education system. Where should that money be allocated? Are we spending millions of dollars trying to retain somebody who's going to leave anyway, right? Or should we be spending more on trying to retain somebody who just needs a little bit more support and they would have stayed? So we're pondering all these questions in the US research landscape.
Yes. And so we were talking about approximately 4.5. It works out to about 60%, like Dr. Etchells was saying, teachers that are leaving schools before their 5 years. So the problem that this presents is, now that you have a teacher that's gone, you have to hire a substitute teacher. And in the United States, substitute teachers are not trained as actual teachers. In fact, they are they can have a high school education or they can have a college education, but they're not trained as teachers. They could be, any profession out there. So the problem with that is that they don't know how to teach children, and they're relying on another teacher to provide lesson plans for those classes. So teachers who already have full loads would have to help write somebody else's lesson plans after they leave. So you don't have a teacher that's invested, that cares about that class, that's planning to stay. Substitute teachers in the United States and in Texas are very temporary. They're there for a couple of weeks and then they go on to do other things. When novices quit mid-year, classes can be divided between teachers. So classes that have in the United States, classrooms are 25 and above. We have at least 25 students in a class, sometimes 30, 35 students. Those students have to be divided between the other teachers. So in my case, the teacher that quit before the end of the school year, he had 125 students, had to be divvied up between 6 other teachers. So we each got more kids, and most of my classes were already at 30 students which is over capacity for the state of Texas. So that also causes some resentment and what we call burnout as well. So when I'm having to teach extra students in a class, there's a lot of classroom management that goes into that. And at the high school level, it's particularly difficult because sometimes they come to class, sometimes they don't. They have minds of their own and they wander off. So it can be difficult at times to get a classroom of 30, 35 students under control so that you can teach one lesson.
Something to keep in mind as well is that 4.5% doesn't seem like a lot until you scale that to a country the size of America. And if you were to do an approximate estimation of what that would look like in Europe, you're looking at the population of Luxembourg leaving the field. So it's a huge number of teachers across the country. I was looking at the chat, a couple of comments coming in. I'm sorry, as narrative inquirers, we're always trying to start a conversation and we want to use the data that's coming to us to talk about it. I thought it was interesting the comment in the chat about Cambodian teachers moving from rural
to urban,
to the cities, moving to urban environments. You see this effect in China, you see it in India, across Europe, you see it in America, that teachers from rural communities want to go and teach. You see this effect in Texas. A large number of our pre-service teachers who would have come from rural communities coming to A&M. That cultural is the A of our M. It's agricultural and mechanical. So we have a large farming community that access the university. Many teachers, once they're qualified, some will return to their hometowns and will teach locally, but many of them will go to Houston, Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin. They'll go and teach in big cities. The same, as I'm sure happens in Cambodia, that then has a kind of an economic shift and a human capital shift, towards the cities that has an effect on the countryside as well. So I think what we see in the US here is probably similar to what you see in Cambodia. And now there's a much greater shift from the Department of Education in America on what is happening with rural schools. And the grant that I lead, the A+ grant, we have a big focus on what's happening in rural schools, what's happening for children, what's happening with educators, because they don't have the same access to resources as you might have from a city. Things aren't just around the corner in a rural community. There's not 100 teachers applying for jobs every year in a rural community. So there's some of the things to ponder when you think about this data in the context of the American education system. And I'm sure we can draw many parallels between, Canada, Cambodia. Some of the people that are listening in now, I'm sure they can draw a lot of parallels between their system and the American system.
All right, so the participants in this study were 7 teachers at a high school in a suburban town. So this is in Central Texas, and all 7 of those teachers taught English language arts 9 through 12. So I taught 11th and 10th. I taught 11th and 12th grade. One of my mentees was a 10th grade gifted and talented teacher. I had a 9th grade teacher, another 11th grade teacher. So we all taught English at different levels. The 4 of the 7 participants were not assigned an official mentor their first year of teaching. So they were in kind of the same boat I was in that first year. So they kind of floundered. The other 3 had mentors assigned to them, but only 2 of them fully utilized that mentor that first year. In fact, the 2 ladies that used their mentors actually told me that their first year teaching was the best year that they had ever had. So in the 23 years of teaching and hundreds of teachers that I've talked to, I think I've talked to 5 teachers total who said, oh yes, my first year of teaching was great. My mentor was great. So this great mentor, someone who's supportive and there and present, is kind of a unicorn. We call those unicorns in the United States. They're very special, and they're very few and far between. So again, this was a sample of convenience. It was just the teachers that were teaching the same thing at the same time I was. Let's go to the next one. So here they are. This was just that they're in their mid-30s, mid-40s. 2 of them were in their, one was in her 50s. She was the oldest one. But for the most part, we all kind of fell within the same age range as myself. The youngest one was my mentee, Travis, and he was quite young, and he did not actually make it his entire year. The rest of us had at least 10 years, if not 25 years, 20. So we all had quite a bit of experience there in that one particular hallway. So what we talked about most of the time was how we experienced our first year of teaching. And like I said, the majority of them had to find a mentor. They had to go out and ask people to help them. Nobody offered to help them. They had to go find someone, which I found a little distressing, because that's basically my experience, is that I had to go find someone to help me. But when I started teaching at this high school, it was very interesting because they came to me almost every day. One or another teacher would come to me. And I feel like it's because their experience having to hunt for someone, they didn't want to have that same experience for me. So they wanted to show me that they were available if I had questions, or if I needed anything. Where's the copier? Where's the staplers? Where are the textbooks that I need to have for my classes? They were all very nice, and they all wanted to be helpful, which I thought was wonderful. The other theme that I found, again, was the baptism by fire or drowning metaphor for being a brand new teacher. And it was just being thrown so many things. Here's 5 classes, here's 120 students, here are all of their needs in your class, here's how many times we do grading, here you have to have XYZ professional development. And that's another thing that on top of having 120 or 130 students, we have to maintain 150 hours worth of professional development every 5 years. And it makes it a little difficult to find professional development, especially now with COVID. You can't go out and attend any kind of professional development. I'm also the lead coordinator for Project MOOPIL, which is online professional development for teachers who have ESL students or economically challenged students. So we are providing all of that online for our teachers so that they can earn credits towards their 150 hours. So when they finally did find a mentor, and again, when I did finally find someone that was willing to help me my first year of teaching, it was someone who I trusted, someone who was present for me, not just physically present, but also emotionally present, who understood how I was feeling a lot of the times, could understand my frustration. And we spent time together outside of school. So I think that was something that was very important as well, that I didn't just see my mentor every day at school. You know, we went to, you know, different things on Saturdays, or we would go to have dinner on Friday, you know, sometimes after school. So it was very important that she was there. So some examples were supportive, listening, allowing venting. And the more we talked about it, the more we came to realize that most of our mentors were the informal kind. So these formal mentors that were assigned to us just didn't work out. Somehow we didn't connect, you know, emotionally. And it became an issue to have a mentor that was assigned. And I think this stigma started coming about where it was a punishment to be someone's mentor. Just one more thing that I have to do now. I have a full load of kids in a class, and now I have to be a mentor, and I have to have my professional development, and it just keeps going on. So a lot of teachers feel like when they're being assigned to be a mentor, that it's not an honor like it should be, but it's more of a punishment, and that it's going to be more of a burden. And in fact, when we talked about this, a lot of the teachers that I've talked to have said, you know, mentoring is wonderful, mentoring is great, mentoring is very important. However, I don't have time to do it. So that's a little bit ironic that they think it's very important, but they're not willing to take on that responsibility. All right, Dr. Etchells.
Just to speak on that very quickly about what Dr. Singer's talking about, this is sort of where our mentoring and coaching academy came from, that piece of mentoring should be something that the mentors are looking forward to, and that they have a feeling of, this is wonderful, I get to use my professional development, I get to use my knowledge, I get to unify that with my experience. But as Dr. Singer was talking about, because it's kind of thrust upon the mentors to be a mentor, they have this feeling of, I don't know what to do, I'm not sure, what if I do it wrong, I'm not really sure how I should be going about this. And I had those same feelings in my first couple of years of being a head of department. I was head of drama, I was head of English, I was dean of students. Through my career, and at each of those stages, you have this feeling of, I know my content very well. Ask me about drama, I'll tell you for weeks. But when it comes to mentoring, I can write it on a post-it note. Everything I know, I can write it down on a small space. So it creates a misalignment between what the school thinks is happening and what's happening with the individuals, which is why one of the questions that came up in the chat was, what are you defining as an official mentor? The official mentor is the person who is assigned to the new teacher by the school. And they say, you know, Mary is going to be your mentor. There's that conversation. The unofficial mentors are the people that you seek out who can help you. It's the person by the photocopier who says, don't press it like that, press it like this, right? Oh, it always jams, kick it here first, right? There's always like the unofficial mentor that you find, and you find many of those. And those unofficial mentors come in many forms. Sometimes they are teachers who have started the school at the same time, and you're supporting each other, you're helping each other. Sometimes for me in my career, they've been students, where a student might come up to me and say, oh, don't worry about it, sir, he's always like that, right? He's like that in every class. And then you feel, oh, I won't take it personally. Yeah. So sometimes it's students, sometimes it's your fellow teachers, sometimes it's parents will come and they will be a mentor to you. So it's this cultural network, this social network and professional network that you build up. But often, the way that mentors are assigned to mentees is based on curriculum or grade. Like, for example, my first year of teaching, I was in charge of a grade 7 class. My assigned mentor was the head of grade 7. When I was an English teacher, my assigned mentor was the head of English. I had nothing in common with any of those mentors except the fact that they knew English and I knew English. They were teaching drama, I was teaching drama. They had a grade 7 class, I had a grade 7 class. And what we know from our research is that it's more than one data point needs to be considered when assigning mentors. There are many things that you have to think about. There are many things: age, race, gender, sex, orientation. There are many pieces that you have to put on the table to see, is this going to be a good match? And like any relationship, it takes time to foster a strong bond. But if you can achieve that, you'll have a really deep relationship with your mentor, which is how originally the Greeks planned it out, right? When they were planning out mentoring, they thought about it from that aspect, that it should be a long-term relationship, a lifelong relationship. You should go back many times to your mentor throughout your life for advice. They should be somebody who becomes family to you over time. And all these things need considering, but just assigning a mentor based off you're in the classroom next to them, when you think about it through that framework, you realize that that might not always work out. Okay, thank you, Dr. Singer.
Welcome. So we have discovered that having a mentor does make a difference. New teachers routinely and consistently say, my mentor made a difference. In the two ladies that I also interviewed who had wonderful mentors, they were the deciding factor whether they continued teaching or not. And really throughout that whole cohort of 7 teachers, the mentors they found eventually were the deciding factor in them staying on teaching. So if they hadn't sought out another mentor, they might not have stayed in the teaching profession at all. So it's painfully obvious that it's important that new teachers who are inexperienced, who are afraid, need someone who has that experience and who has a presence in their life. And as Dr. Etchells was talking about, it should be a lifelong mentorship. So we've talked about in the state of Texas, they only need a mentor for the first year. And that's usually what happens. It's just the first year that they get the mentor, and then they're supposed to go off their second year and be an amazing teacher. Well, that's not how teaching works. You learn all the hard lessons the first year, you learn some more hard lessons the second year, and then you just continue to grow. And a mentor is important to have in those first 5 years. We've talked about having mentors need to be around for more than the first year and more than the second year. So, and Dr. Etchells talked about that they're chosen by the administration because of their years of experience or their location or their content, and that's not always what makes a good mentor. And I think we've talked to, so teachers are not always asked. Again, this can cause some resentment if a teacher is told that they have to be someone's mentor and they're not prepared for it. They're not emotionally prepared for it. They're not, they've got all these students and they have paperwork, and they may be, still pretty new themselves. In fact, several of the teachers that I've talked to in the last couple of months who are working on our mentoring and coaching academy, they're second-year teachers, and they're being asked to be mentors to first-year teachers. So it's a little concerning that we've got brand new teachers mentoring brand new teachers. So anyway, it's important that they have the proper training and that they understand that, don't panic is a lot of I tend to panic. All right, so let's go. This one. So we talk about the characteristics of an effective mentor, and if some of you did, Dr. Etchells, are you monitoring the chat for me?
Sure. Yeah, we've got lots of questions coming up, Dr. Singh. I think it might be good to look at some more of those questions a little bit further on, but we're getting lots of questions about how do we recruit teachers for rural schools, what's considered an official mentor, what education looks like in different countries. So,
all right, I'm just seeing them pop up and I keep thinking I'm missing something. So
I figured if Mr. Netra, am I right believing that we should present for maybe another sort of 10 minutes and then get to questions?
You can answer questions. Does that work? All right. So our mentoring and coaching academy that we have, we outlined some of the characteristics and some of the things that mentors need to know. So characteristics of an effective mentor, regarding their attitude and their character, they're willing to be a role model. They're willing to step up to this position and take the responsibility, and they're reflective, and they're able to learn from their own mistakes. They exhibit a strong commitment to the teaching profession. It's not that they're being told to do something, they're volunteering to be a mentor. They're asking their administrator, who can I help? How can I help? They believe that mentoring improves instructional practice. They're willing to advocate on behalf of their colleagues. I think a good sense of humor is also very important. Things happen in the school day that are just unavoidable. Children do things, and you have to be able to maintain a sense of calm and a sense of humor about that. A mentor enjoys new challenges, demonstrates a lifelong commitment to learning. So these are some of the attitudes and characteristics that mentors need to have. Dr. Etchells, I'll let you do professional competence and experience.
Good, thank you, Dr. Singer. So when we look at professional competence and experience, we asked, is regarded by the colleges as an outstanding teacher. So I have everybody's picture of my screen. And then maintaining a network, professional network and contacts is really important. Everybody's saying that that's something that's key. When we look at has excellent knowledge of pedagogy and subject matter, folks that we looked at, they understand the policies well, they understand the procedures of the school, the district, and the teacher association. That's one thing that is very prominent in the US, as you may see from the new Secretary of Education. Something the teachers union in the US has a lot of power, and it's important to understand how that system works in relation to the school system. Some countries don't have teacher unions, such as when I was in the United Arab Emirates, they just don't have a teachers union there. There's nothing at the national level. So it does vary from country to country. Then we look at has confidence in their own instructional skills, is a meticulous observer of classroom practice. One thing that we get trained for at Texas A&M universities is how to look, how to observe things, how to look at something in a different light, look at it in a slightly different way. We're kind of trained on that, and it takes a long time to really consider that in the classroom, ways of looking and how to observe something. What are you looking for? What might somebody else be looking for in a classroom or come into play? We find that takes years of practice. I know for myself, and I'm sure Dr. Singer's the same, as being head of multiple departments and dean of students, and then working at the university here, I've easily watched 100,000 hours of classrooms, easily sat in the back corner with my notepad and my clipboard, observing teachers, observing students, looking at them for different aspects. So that takes time to get that right. And then demonstrates excellent classroom management skills, collaborates well with other teachers and administrators. So that piece of getting along with other folks is really important. We've seen many a sort of spear and shield toting teacher go into the classroom thinking they're going to change the world, and 2 years later they resign in floods of tears, spat out by the system. Then demonstrates, feels comfortable being observed by other teachers. I always find it interesting going into a school, because we do a lot of school visits here. And through different parts of my career, I've walked into many schools. So looking at that in terms of when I walk down a corridor, are the doors open or are they closed? How many people are employed in that space that are okay with being observed, being okay with being watched in the classrooms? In schools, it's always a question for me, who is there to look at other people? How many managers are there? How many heads of department? How many leaders, assistant principals, corridor supervisors was something we had when I was in the Middle East. There'd be somebody's full-time job is to be in the corridor. I'm sure you have something similar to that in Cambodia, that there's a system of supervisors around the school who manage the students beyond the teacher, right? I'm sure you have that system. And then those folks are willing to learn new teaching strategies from protégés. We've seen sometimes the education policy, especially in the UK and America, Australia has the same effect, Canada, I'm sure to a certain extent, that some folks on the call might talk about. There'll be national change, the national curriculum will change. And at that point, some teachers will decide, I'm not teaching anymore. I'm going to leave the field. And they resign because of policy, because of policy change. Because they've decided I've got, sometimes, for example, 2-3 years left of teaching. And it's not worth me redoing all my lesson plans or my PowerPoints, redesigning everything, learning this new thing. I'll take early retirement and I'll buy back 3-4 years. I've seen that happen in multiple countries with multiple teachers, that kind of policy change, pushing out some teachers. Good, Dr. Singer, would you like to carry on?
And that happens, quite frequently, what Dr. Etchells was talking about, in school systems all over Texas. When something new comes up and teachers who have been doing it the same way year after year after year are really resistant to making changes. And so you really want to be careful about making that person a mentor, especially if they're not willing to be open to new ideas. And so communication skills are very important. You can't just walk by, say, hey, is everything okay? And then just keep walking. There needs to be some deep conversations between the mentor and the mentee. There needs to be a relationship there. You can't just, what I call drive-by mentoring. You can't just come into your classroom for a few minutes and observe just a minute or two and then say, and then give a critique. That's not how it works. And the mentor needs to be able to give positive feedback, not just criticism. Oh, well, you didn't do this. You don't have your objectives on the board. Your Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills are not up there. You have so-and-so in the back of the classroom who's passing notes to little Johnny. You can't just have negative things to say about someone's classroom. There should be an equal amount of positive things that are going on in that classroom to the negative things that are going on in that classroom. There is also the mentor needs to be able to actively listen to what's being said and what's not being said from a mentee. Just because I say I'm fine all the time doesn't mean I'm fine. That might be the coping word that I'm using right now. But if, a supportive mentor knows that my third period class is usually pretty rowdy and they usually give me a hard time. So I'm going to make sure that I'm checking on my mentee after third period to make sure everything went well. Or, you know, I've noticed that some things are happening in this teacher's classroom. I need to make sure that the teacher is doing okay. So it's also important that the mentor be discreet and maintain confidentiality. It's a difficult word to say. So it's almost like a therapeutic relationship. You know, if something I tell you in confidence, it needs to stay in confidence and not be transmitted to the principal or the assistant principal. So let's see, we have interpersonal skills as well. You know, it's really important that they have a professional relationship and a trusting relationship as well. So let me go to the next slide. Oh, and I think the most important one is being patient. That one's kind of at the bottom. It's really difficult to remember a lot of times how it felt to be a brand new teacher. So you have to be patient with new teachers. They're still learning and they still want to learn. And I think it's important that we give them that environment, that supportive environment, so that they can continue to grow. Okay. And so what mentors need to know.
Dr. Singh, I was going to suggest that we put a pin in this one slide, because we're going to show you this slide again tomorrow in more detail and in the context of the Mentoring and Coaching Academy, and we'll talk through each of the steps. So I think we'll show you today, but then it's going to encourage you to come tomorrow to see the actual practicality of this presentation.
So yeah,
before we get to questions, I wanted to share one thing with you all. It's great to talk about professional development and it's great to talk about mentoring, but one of the key issues is how do mentors get the knowledge that they need to meet the mentees' needs. For us at Texas A&M University, we spent the last number of years developing what we call MOOPILs. It's the grant that Erin runs, that Dr. Singer does. Her project is called Project MOOPIL. And then within the project that I run, 2 of the 5 components are focused on professional development for teachers and professional development for leaders. And they're free. We fully subsidize them through the center. They'll be free until the end of 22. So what I'm going to do, if it's okay, I'm going to share the links for this professional development in the chat. And what I would ask, you're free to take them yourselves. I know we've got people from Canada in the conversation. I'm sure there's some folks from all across Asia in the conversation. And what I would say is we would like everybody to have access to this. So if I share it in the conversation, just grab it, cut and paste it, and then share it out. You know, feel free to put it on your Facebook, share it out with your friends, with your teachers. But what I would say, those of you who are professors at the university and other universities, and those of you who are educators in the field, share it with 10 people that you know. That would really help us to get the word out. These are all research-based. They're all done by American scholars. As you know, Texas A&M is a tier 1 research institution, so we know what we have at the university works. We've done our homework on it. We know from MOOPILs that these have an impact on how teachers learn. So I'll go ahead and share that. I don't want to take too much time because it's not what we were talking about today.
And then we'll get to the questions in just a second.
They're all there for you. So we have MOOPILs for administrators, MOOPILs for teachers, MOOPILs for parents, MOOPILs for paraprofessionals. And you'll see admin twice and you'll see teacher twice, because one lot is from Erin's grant and one lot is from my grant. But for you, they're all free. You can just take them and do as many as you like. And there's easily, I'd say easily 800 to 1,000 hours worth of professional development across all of those links. So you can share them with your parents, you can share them with your teachers, you can share them with your administrators, you can do them yourself. So that's our gift to the conference today. Easily, we've invested about $1 million in developing this professional development. So I wanted to share it with you today. and to say thank you for inviting us and for hosting us and having us at your conference in Cambodia. Any other year, apart from a year when there's a pandemic, I would have been the first one on a plane to come to Cambodia, and I would have been there in person, and I would have liked to shake lots of hands and meet lots of people. But hopefully we can do this next year, and we'll get a chance to come to Cambodia and visit with you all. As we say in Texas, we get to come and visit. So I think if it's okay, we'll open up for questions. I saw a lot of questions coming in the chat, so maybe some folks can ask those, or you can read them out.
Yeah, thank you so much for your very interesting sharing, Erin and Etchells. So you have around 20 minutes for answering the questions. So far we have a lot of questions in the chats about, because topic is really, really interesting. Thank you. So I would like to read the question for you. So the first question is from Sruli Hull, written that in terms of burnout, I want to know the work condition of you as teacher. For example, working hours, incentive. Would you mind to persist this? Thank you.
He's asking about burnout in teachers and what.
Yeah, what the working condition is contributing to teacher burnout.
It does, actually. The working conditions do. Oftentimes, we have overfull classes, anywhere between 30 and 35 students. Teachers have to prepare lesson plans weekly, but it's for the whole week. And then they have extra duties on top of that, whether it's before school or after school, but every teacher has duty. In addition to calling parents and making contacts with parents, there are grading requirements, each depending on the grade level. So elementary grade level is at 9 weeks, secondary is at 6 weeks. So every 9 weeks or every 6 weeks, they have to have a certain amount of grades entered into the grade book. And if they don't, they have to explain themselves. Some of the other things, many of our students come from low socioeconomic, so they're not wealthy. And so we end up supplying a lot of things. I know as a brand new teacher, I supplied, many different things between pencils. I ended up supplying coats and food and paper, things that I spent my money on for my students. So there's a lot of things that go into being a teacher in the United States, and it depends on where you're a teacher. So if you're in an urban area with a large population of low socioeconomic students, you may end up providing them with paper and pencil and erasers, crayons and markers. If you're working in a more wealthy environment, in a suburban area, you may not have those same types of issues in your schools.
There's one thing that you have to understand about the American context for schools, and it's related to two factors. One factor is No Child Left Behind, which was an iteration of the ESEA Act. So under that same act, you saw Reagan, A Nation at Risk, and then with No Child Left Behind. So we see that element of accountability, high stakes testing coming into the education system that led to teachers moving away from more creative teaching in their classroom. It saw funding getting cut for things like music, dance, drama, the arts, and a high focus on STEM education. So math, science education became king in the classroom. So that's one factor. No Child Left Behind has had a huge impact on the direction of American education. The second thing to consider about the conditions of American schools is how tax relates to school funding and the percentage of tax. So in the US, 1% of tax will go towards education, but that tax amount is relative to the local education authority. So for example, and we call it different sides of the tracks in America. Imagine on one side of the tracks, let's say you're getting 12% tax, but the average income of that area is $60,000. On the other side of the tracks, you're still getting 12% tax, but the average income is $120,000. On one side of the tracks, I have $1 to spend. On the other side of the tracks, I have $2 to spend. And there's a famous case in the US of one school that was a fairly low SCS school was given $1 million, and another school was given $1 million. The one school that was given $1 million, that was a wealthy school, they bought more horses for the equestrian club. Every child got a laptop. They took a couple of school trips. So the $1 million went into these things. The other school, the $1 million, they had sewage from the bathroom running through the cafeteria. So they fixed the bathrooms and they fixed the cafeteria. So at the end of $1 million of taxpayers' money, School A have got new horses, new computers, new bus for the school trips. School B now has a working bathroom and a working cafeteria. So who's further along? So what you see over time is the compounded effect year in, year out of tax money going into schools that leads to poorer schools getting poorer and richer schools getting richer. And that difference in the US now has created a system of two school systems, the haves and have-nots. That has led now to a proliferation of charter schools, other types of schools coming in, teachers moving to more affluent schools. And that has led to rural schools with predominantly students of color being left behind, high quality teachers, and then retain those teachers in the schools. That then has a socioeconomic effect on that rural area as a whole, about opportunities, advancement, all these different pieces. So it's a compounded effect over a number of years. One thing I do at A&M is I show, because I teach an international class, I show my students the PISA rankings and I show them where the US is. And I always say, you know, the Cold War with Russia, the US did beat Russia, and you can see the US is 23 and Russia's 26, right? But when you look at PISA, you can see there's a whole lot of other countries who are succeeding and getting higher achievement than the US. So when we start looking at those factors, tax comes in, No Child Left Behind comes in, and they start to understand that some of the overlaying pieces that are affecting American education, that the individual teacher cannot change, right? You could be the best teacher in the world, your school is still getting 12% tax. You can be the best teacher in the world, you've still got to live under No Child Left Behind. So, and this is something that leads to teachers leaving the field, that they feel themselves, and we call it white savior syndrome in some places in America. The teacher themselves feels like they can go in like superhero, right? And they're going to change the classroom. They're going to change the school. They're going to change the local environment. But all these other factors kick in, and then the teacher feels powerless. I'm not changing anything. I'm just getting burnt out. And then they leave the field. So this is some of the factors that you need to be aware of when we talk about burnout. It's not just a mentoring program. It's not just let's paint the classroom, let's put nicer windows. These things are small. It's so many systematic pieces that need to change in the overall system, right from policy through to physical buildings. There has to be change all the way through the system.
Yeah, thank you very much for your interesting answer, Etchells and Singer. So you have around 12 minutes more to answer the question, and there are some more questions waiting for you to answer. So the next question is from Kum Koi Lee, written that, how long does the teaching license last in Texas? In Cambodian, teaching license is lasted for lifelong profession. Another question is, how can you prevent novice teachers from quitting from their teaching career, especially for the first year experience of teaching? Thank you.
So in Texas, we used to have lifetime certificates. I have 2 lifetime certificates. But in 2002, the law changed. And so now teachers have a 5-year certificate, and to maintain that 5-year certificate, they have to have 150 hours of professional development. and then they just renew it. If you don't get the 150 hours of professional development, then you lose your certificate. So up until 2002, we had lifetime certificates, and now they're 5-year certificates. And what was the other question? How to keep novice teachers? What was, Dr. Etchells, do you remember?
It was how to retain novice teachers in the field. And my feeling on that is that you have to tell them the truth, right?
It's very important. The truth is very important.
Yeah, there's no point telling new teachers that they're going to go in the classroom, because you have to remember some teachers that we have in classrooms that come to the university, they want to be a teacher. The mother was a teacher, their father was a teacher. Some of them come from a long line, a long legacy of teachers. So to go into a classroom and then feel like, I don't want to do this, there's a lot of guilt, a lot of pressure on them to go into that career and to be a successful teacher. Moreover, one of the effects that we've seen in the US is that teaching has become a predominantly female profession, especially in Texas. In the teacher education program, we see many more women than men coming into teaching. But some have the view that it's going to be like Alice in Wonderland, or like Mary Poppins or Snow White. You know, you'll walk in the classroom, all the kids will love you. There'll be like birds singing outside your window, rabbits jumping up to you at break time. And when they go into a classroom and on the first day, a student throws a chair at them and they get called, you know, this and that, it's a culture shock. So one thing that we're trying to do at the university is tell them the realities of what this is like. If you're watching Freedom Writers and think that's going to be your first day in school, it's going to be very different from how you think. So really being honest with them, giving them lots of field placement experiences, enabling them to go to many different schools in many different environments so they can decide what grades they want to teach, what classroom style you want to be in, which environment you want to be in. We send them to urban, rural, suburban schools. So they have a lot more time in the classroom than they used to have. And we're seeing that overall that's having a good effect on teacher retention. You might not know this, but Texas A&M graduates the most teachers in the state of Texas. We graduate about 2,000 teachers a year out of A&M. So we're really a leader in the state for professional development and for teacher education. So it's really important that we prepare teachers correctly for the field and that they know what they're walking into. That's the big piece. Give them as much time. If you have an education program in your network, give them as much time in classrooms as you can. But you have to marry up their knowledge with that time. Otherwise, everything they're experiencing is out of context from what they know. And if they spend too much at the university learning, then they're full of knowledge without any application. So there's a delicate balance between knowledge to practice that you need to find.
Yeah, thank you very much for your answer. So you have around 7 minutes more to answer the next question, and some more questions waiting for you to answer. So thank you. So the next question is from Chiang Channa. So stated that in Cambodia, teachers in rural areas and capital is quick difference due to living conditions. Most teachers prefer to change their workplace to the city for good living condition. So how to retain teachers in rural areas or remote areas to keep inclusive and equitable education for all students? Thank you.
I think my personal opinion, and this is not the opinion of Texas A&M University, this is the opinion of Dr. Matthew Etchells. I think you have to give rural schools the resources that you're giving to urban and suburban schools. Rural schools in America have been left behind in terms of resources, access to professional development, cutting edge research going into the schools. There has been a refocus from the Department of Education on rural schools, and that is starting to have an impact and make a change. The grant that we work on and many of the grants that we have in the ELRC and CRDLLA are rural focused. They're dual language focused on educators and school leaders. We believe that developing the capacity of the school leaders will affect the entire school. Where the leader goes, the school will follow. So there's some of the things that we look at, but there has been huge differences between what has happened in urban schools and then what has happened in rural schools. But also there's something to consider in America about the gentrification of some of the rural areas in some of the cities. For example, Austin, that you may know, is perceived as quite a liberal area in Texas, which is predominantly conservative and Republican, tends to be Texas. But Austin somehow slipped through the net and is quite liberal. One thing that's happened in Austin is an urban environment. However, because of the development, economic development, social development that's happened in Austin, it's led to a lot of wealthy folks coming into downtown Austin and buying up property, buying up business, houses, and that has displaced the people that were traditionally living in Austin. And predominantly that's been people of color, and white folks have moved in, pushing out people of color because they outprice them from the property market. So when we have programs at universities where your multicultural education program is called urban education and you're training people in urban education, that framework doesn't hold up when you go to somewhere like Austin, because the demographic is different, the economics look different. You go to some places, Austin, the schools are outstanding. So when you walk into an urban school thinking, oh, I'm going to walk into a poor school, every kid's going to be on free and reduced lunch, that's not always the case in Austin. So you've got to think about the terminology. Like when we say rural, what does that mean? Is that always the case, right? Like the a syllogism of the statement. Is it always going to be the case that rural schools are less affluent than urban schools? Some places that's not true, right? If you go to parts of England, some of the urban schools are very poor and some of the rural schools, private schools, are doing just fine, right? They're very wealthy. So when we say rural, it can't always mean that they're in poverty, that there's negative effects. And when you say urban, it can't always mean that it's a good thing, the school's doing fine. And again, with suburban, right, we're seeing now that folks, especially in England, folks are leaving suburbia and moving closer to London, moving closer to Manchester. So it's creating this vacuum in suburbia of resources, of schools, of teachers. So we're seeing this multi-level effect happening. So when we use terms urban, rural, we've got to think, is that always true? Like when I say rural in Texas, it's not going to mean the same rural in Cambodia. There'll be a different statement there. Okay, so we've got to consider, like, what does it mean? We can't just say urban or rural and think it's a universal term. It depends on where you're talking about. It depends what time period you're talking about. If I talked about Austin 60 years ago, it's different from Austin now. So saying urban doesn't have the same effect over time. One thing we say as narrative inquirers is something might be true. Like some people believe there's a capital T, right? There's a big truth. We believe in little t's. So things might be truth-like, or might be true for now. Like, for example, if something drastically changed in Austin and the economics changed, I could come back here next year and I can't say Austin is affluent anymore, right? I can't say that white people are displacing people of color in Austin. That might not be a true statement, but it's true for now. So that's one of the things we talk about as narrative inquirers. What is true and how long is that true for? But it's true for now or truth-like. So it's something to consider.
So thank you very much for your interesting answers, Etchells and Singer. So hopefully this answer would be useful for our participants. Because of time constraints, we could not answer all the questions have been dropped in the chat box. So the rest question would be answered in forums. So thank you very much. So before ending off your sharing, do you have something to say?
I would just say if you're trying to start a mentoring coaching program, if you're looking at how to develop your teacher education program, if you're interested in professional development, I'm our director for education outreach for our Education Leadership Center and our Dual Language Center. You can email me. One of the things we would like to do in the ELRC and CRDLLA is we would like to do more international work I would love to spend half the year on a plane flying around consulting for school systems. So if this is something, I know that one person wrote to me privately and said, how can we bring a mentoring and coaching program to the Philippines? You can take our program, take out where it says Texas, put in Philippines, and you've got a mentoring and coaching program. So this is things that we do in the US and in Texas, we can implement across the world. So email me. I will put my email in the chat for you, and feel free. I might take a minute. You know, if 90 people email me at the same time, it might take me a minute to get back to you, but I will eventually. So feel free. And if you need any of our professional development that we have that is free and subsidized by us, we will share it with you. Like the MOOPILs today, we're more than happy to share it with you. And then during the summer and year round, we do virtual, synchronous and asynchronous professional development, all about education. You're more than welcome to attend those as well. We would like as many people as possible to come and do professional development with us. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. We do stuff on virtual
Online.
meetings. This one. So geography shouldn't be a barrier to learning. So we're making it not a barrier, and we want to share with everybody. So here's my email.
Yes, thank you very much, Etchells and Singer, for your great sharing to us. So now your presentation, also discussion is finished. So thank you so much. Hope to see you again next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hopefully tomorrow.
Yes, tomorrow.
All right. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.